What do you think is the one thing at the moment? Women are getting more and more educated. You have put so much work out recently. Incredible, everything you're doing. What do you think is the number one thing that women are still not really understanding about optimizing for longevity?
I think everyone is missing the mark because they're looking for that 1%. They're going down the rapamycin, the methylene blue, the hot cold, all of those little X factors, and they're forgetting the foundational stuff. They're forgetting about sleep and how you can't budge the needle on anything from metabolism, body comp, any of that, unless you have really good, adequate sleep. And then they look at physical activity, and there's so many rabbit holes to go down when you're listening to a lot of the media chatter that's out there. Like, what do I do? Do I lift heavy or do I do high reps? Do I do zone 2? Do I do high intensity? And so they're not really paying attention to what their body needs and where they are. They're just kind of following the trends, and same with nutrition. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are missing out on the whole community and nature aspect that's so beneficial for improving parasympathetic, extending life. Like, there's so much research about green space and being in green space. And people are just kind of like, oh, but what about methylene blue? What about rapamycin? What about all these other supplements that I should be taking, when they're missing the mark on just the basic foundations?
That's such a great point. And I see it actually a lot myself. And they're almost like optimizing for things that, like supplements, for example, which are supplemental without
Right.
getting the basics right. And it surprises me when I see people who are having kind of energy crashes and they haven't even gone out and got morning light, for example. But they're
Right.
thinking, what can I take to boost my energy? It's kind of almost putting the advanced strategies ahead of the basics.
Because they're listening to the bro science, the bros of N of One bros, the Brian Johnsons and the others of the world. Let's do this, this, this. And they're experimenting on themselves. Then they make documentaries, they put out podcasts, all that stuff. And people just have lost sight of what are our basic fundamentals that we need to do. And the other thing that women are missing, and it's not by the fault of them, it's the fact that most of the stuff, if not all the stuff that's coming out about longevity, again, is on male data. There's a very small amount on active women, like, because we know exercise over a longer period of time creates really strong epigenetic changes. And those epigenetic changes will mean that you are aging differently than someone who hasn't exercised. So the strategies that they're putting out there about exercise and kind of body composition optimization is different for someone who's never exercised or is just dabbling in it versus someone who's had a really long history in it.
Insofar as the person who's had a really long history is going to see better results, lower inflammation, aging slower.
Yeah, for the most part, definitely. But then when you're looking at, I'll always bring it back to like the zone 2, because everyone can kind of relate to that. It's like, if you have never been doing any exercise, then you're midlife. Maybe you do want to spend some time doing the zone 2 to just boost your capacity to really jumpstart your mitochondria. But if you have been active your whole life, you don't need to do that, because your body's already really capable of that and being metabolically flexible. But no one talks about those nuances. Those nuances are lost in so much of the conversation, because we go from sleep to the 1% X factor of supplementations. And no one's really looking at what are our skewed variations. And part of it also, I like to bring this back to simple things like the sociocultural experience of women who are 50 now versus who are 80 now. So people who are 50 now, they had the opportunity to grow into more brain stimulating jobs and occupations versus someone who's 80. So we're looking at Alzheimer's and dementia changes, right? The population that's 80 now is going to be completely different from the population that's 80 in 30 years, because of the differences in their brain stimulation in key moments of time. And that also is not being brought up, because there is a significant sex difference in those kinds of opportunities that women versus men have. So the whole aging thing is really interesting, and I'm really interested to see how it's playing out. But there's so many things that women are just not aware of because it hasn't been brought out into the conversation.
Right. And that's really interesting, because I was actually looking at exactly that point in the context. So I'm watching my mum, very sad and emotional, my mum with Alzheimer's, and she's in her 80s. But I'm looking at what, and it's hard, right? And for anyone listening to this, it's super hard because you're losing that person. I'm losing like my best friend who I told everything to in front of my eyes. And it's actually, you know what, it really has taught me the meaning of life and love and emotion, because I realized that when I'm with her, it's that energy. But it's kind of comes back to what you were talking about, the fundamentals, the basics of being out in green spaces, of nature, of having loving relationships, right? It takes it back to what really like matters. And when I look at my mum, I think actually there's lots of things that I'm doing that she didn't do. So like education is one that you talked about. I was a corporate lawyer, so I trained for many years. I've used my brain. I've changed direction, changed career. I'm using it now. She was raising us and kind of working with my dad. She was very active and she swam loads, but she didn't really strength train. I noticed as well, she didn't, and it wasn't a thing 30 years ago, she didn't expose her brain to lactate, right? There's more research coming out around that. She didn't do high intensity. So when we left home, naturally, her life sort of transitioned into more sedentary. There's just so many bits. So I kind of think almost trying to, like, I suppose, learn from her. You need to look at what was her life like at 50, because it was very different than mine is.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And so, when you're looking at all these images, these fMRI images that are coming out about brain changes in menopause, and we start thinking about, okay, so that's the brain now, but what was that brain like in someone who's your mom's age? Like, what are the same changes? So, yeah, that's why I'm like, yeah, it's really interesting this time because of the focus on longevity, and there are factors that people are forgetting. So, part of it, right, is looking at our parents and going, okay, how are you aging? What are you doing that did well, and what are you doing that I can change for myself before I get to be 80?